It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline. Okay, now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily. With positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Beyond the Headlines, brought to you by Fox Sports Radio. I'm your host, Renee Washington. Excited to bring you another great episode of interviews as you're going to get the chance to learn behind the scenes filmmakers. I know we've talked music, entertainment, sports, news. We get into so many different topics. Well, today I've got three great guests on as we're going to be able to meet the filmmakers and co-creators of the Bordered web series. We've got Lauryn Lugo and we've got twin brothers, Andrew and Adrian Nuno, who are going to be joining us today. So we're getting a little bit different, a twist here of learning about their story, their journey into creating the incredible web series that's educating and enlightening and is really providing some great stories. So I am excited to have this episode be our very own Redefining Us. They're breaking barriers. They're discussing different topics and getting into whether it's diversity, racial diversity, socioeconomic, different aspects. It's a Redefining Us episode as we're learning about the crew behind the Bordered web series. So I hope you guys are ready for this episode of Beyond the Headlines.
Here's our host, Renee Washington, with Redefining Us.
It is not every episode I get to be joined by not one, not two, but three incredibly accomplished guests on the show. And so I am so excited to have the three of you guys here, Adrian, Andrew, and Lauren. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you
For having us.
Thanks for having us.
I am thrilled to have each of you here. You guys have been doing some great work as you have been creating the Bordered web series. Now, before we get into that specifically, of course, I have to ask, it's the holiday season. How are your holidays going?
It's going pretty good. Can't complain. Did all my holiday shopping. So, I would say.
Seriously?
Yeah. Seriously, yeah.
Both of you have.
That's his nature.
Yeah, must be nice. Must be nice.
Lauren, have you done your holiday shopping? Because I'm here I haven't even started, really.
I mean, I've thought about it. I've thought about what I will buy for people, if that counts at all, but that's about as far as I've gotten. So
there's still time, no worries. Yeah.
It's pretty short, actually. It's already, as we're having this conversation, I mean, we're halfway through December. I've mentally shopped too. I have mentally shopped. I don't know if I'll get things in time, but you guys are really making me feel like I'm very behind the eight ball now, Adrian and Andrew, because I'm was not expecting that at all. Okay. Wow. I love the fact that you're ahead of everything, including holiday shopping. So it's a lot about your personality. But I know as we get into just discussing the different aspects of the Bordered web series you created, that it started before then. For the three of you, Lauren was telling me about how you guys grew up in the same town, the same area, but did not actually meet until the two of you were in college. And Lauren was coaching you in your filmmaking program that you're a part of. So I've got to ask, being able to work with, you've got brothers, your friends, you go way back, what's it like being able to work together and create with people that are family, literally and figuratively?
Yeah. I mean, I know at least for Adrian and I, our collaborative process goes back 13 is it 13 years? About 13 years. Going on 13 years now. We've been making stuff since we were 12 years old. And it's been awesome that, throughout this whole process, we've been able to just keep creating content, every year, him and I kind of just tackling something new. And then, when we started working with Lauren, originally she was our coach. And that's how kind of our friendship started. And then when we found out she was, a writer and an actress, we're like, okay, there could be something here. And then, we started doing some slam poetry videos together. And then we made a short film called Little Things. And then we made this web series. So it's really awesome how, Lauren started off as our coach and very much our mentor. And throughout the process of, all these projects that we've done together, from a short film to a web series to Sam poetry video, she's not only become, a great friend of ours, but one of our very best collaborators.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Lauryn, look at them giving you your flowers.
I know, it's so cute.
Oh man, that is great. That's incredible. Again, you have friendship, it's like a family, and you guys can now work together. As you mentioned, the creative process goes back years, but being able to work together and having that trust and being on the same page, I'm sure is very important. So introduce us to the Bordered web series. How did this come about? We'll start there. And whoever wants to jump in first, what made you decide, you've created together in the past, what made you decide to make this project and to launch this first season of the series?
Well, I think the big thing was we had a lot of success with little things, and I think we weren't expecting it at first. Like, obviously, we put a lot of work into little things, and it was a big passion project for all of us. And then when that did well, and not only did it do well, but we loved it, we enjoyed every second of it. We thought, let's tackle something else. Little Things was kind of focused on depression and suicide. And so then we thought, okay, what's something different that we can do that still speaks to us on this crazy level? And we know that would speak to a lot of different people. And so then we got into the topic of doing something like Bordered, right? Family coming together and, dealing with being LatinX and being a part of like the LGBTQ community. And like, what would that be like? What would that story look like? And just the more we talked about it, we were like, maybe this has to be a show. And we hadn't done anything like it before. And we were like, okay, well, like that's a giant undertaking. And we just, maybe the boys will disagree with me, but I feel like it was like, we knew it was going to be huge, like a huge undertaking, like I said. And I think we were just like, let's just do it. Like there, wasn't even that long of a conversation. It was like, show or movie, show, let's go. And then kind of off to the races at that point.
Yeah. And not to even mention filming in the midst of a pandemic, especially when we started this whole project, we prepared for a lot of things, but one of the things that we never prepared for was dealing with a once in a century pandemic where no YouTube tutorial, no guide could ever prepare you for that. And fortunately, we worked with such a wonderful crew and cast that we were not only able to get through filming that, but also got to release the show this year. It was my first time working with a post-production crew entirely virtually. And so it was definitely a challenge unlike anything I've ever done before. But that's why I'm all the more proud of this show and what we've done. And just piggybacking off of that, not only from we're twins. Not only from a production standpoint was it incredibly tough, but I think also from a story standpoint, it was really tough because so much of our personal narratives, Lauren's narrative, Adrian's narrative, my narrative, we poured out onto the screen. And so that was really frightening as well, was taking our personal stories and throwing it up on screen for people to see. And that was a really frightening aspect, at least for me, really taking our childhood and the good and the bad and throwing it into this narrative for people to see and see what they think for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So there's a lot of different parts of that you hit on, and I'm going to start with the COVID side before we get into, as you were just sharing, Andrew, around what this really meant to you guys personally. I've got to know, as you were saying, Adrian, not easy filming during a pandemic, and it is just remarkable to me the amount of conversations I have with people that their business, their idea, whatever they're doing now, launched in the midst of the pandemic. And it's like, during COVID, I did this, and I finally it just happened. And as you talked about, you had your post-production crew was not even in person. They were virtual, remote editing and everything. So I've got to know what really was the plan, like in terms of casting and filming during the pandemic. What were kind of like some restrictions? How did you guys work through that?
Yeah, well, when you said restrictions, one of the first things that comes to mind is that we initially had a much bigger finale planned where we were going to have a bunch of extras in a high school gym. But then it was literally until I think like the second weekend of filming that COVID started coming up. And so we thought, okay, we're just going to keep our ear to the ground, see what happens. And then literally I think it was the next weekend that the shutdown started happening. And so we literally paused filming for about 6 months after the second weekend of filming. And then I think it was around August that Andrew said to me, I think we're close enough where we can resume filming, but do it in, of course, as safe a manner as we can. So we invested a lot more in masks, hand sanitizer, sanitation wipes, and we even had to rewrite a lot of the scenes that we had. For example, the high school reunion in the gym, we had to rewrite from a gym to a small bar. And we had to be very creative with the extras we had, even like having them bring like a extra set of clothes to change into, so that way for a different shot we had, they could look different, as opposed to people being like, that's the same extra from the last shot, you know. Even things like that we had to be very creative and think on our feet in terms of all of that.
Yeah. Wow, that's remarkable. So you basically had, because you had to have less people, but still try to make it look like it's full. You have the same people just kind of swapping a shirt or a hat or something, changing their hair maybe, and being in a different. Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
Yeah, and there were scenes that we shot that we originally had planned to shoot indoors that we shot outdoors. So there were some scenes, like, again, like Adrian said, we just had to rework completely. Like, hey, does this have to be inside? Could we do it outside so that we can be out in the air and able to like social distance a little bit more? So yeah, it took a lot of editing on the script side, and then just like clever filmmaking and shooting in general. A lot. It was a lot.
Oh yeah, and just a shout out to our unit production manager Thomas Sepernick, our associate producer Anna Fleming, and then also one of our producers Neil Perkellis, who they all did just a phenomenal job working on making sure that everyone was safe, so that way we could just focus on mainly on working with the actors, working on getting the story done on set as best as we could, because without them, this would have definitely been a much more mammoth task for us to do.
Yeah. And then from a post-production aspect, I mean, just communicating with all the people online, it was just a lot of emails, lots of emails. Just a lot of just like being patient with like file transfers and file uploads and file downloads, and making sure the resolution of a file, you know, came to us the same way that it was made. And I know for Adrian, especially as we were nearing the end of the post-production process, I mean, I had to help him keep his sanity because it was just so much clutter at once that we had to, you know, find our way through to make sure that, you know, files weren't misplaced or lost, and that we had everything that we needed for each episode.
I have a much greater appreciation for high-speed internet after this. I will put it that way.
Okay, I could see that. I could definitely see that when you have to like manually track everything because everybody's all over the place. It's not like we're all sitting in one, you know, room working through post-production, and post-production is not fun. I know that for a fact. So that is incredible. So casting, I'm sure, then also looks different. Did you have a cast kind of before the pandemic? Like, what's the timeline of casting in the midst of COVID? Like, where did that all kind of work?
We did cast beforehand. We cast before the pandemic started, and actually, so the woman who played our mother in the show, she was actually she's an actress, of course, so she was about to tour. So we had to shoot all of her scenes before we were even planning on starting to film. So we filmed all of her stuff in, what was it, guys, 2 weeks? Like, we did 2 weekends. Yeah. And then she was preparing to, like, you know, head off to her tour. And then that's when the pandemic happened. So we got all of her stuff out of the way. And then she ended up, of course, not going on tour either because of the pandemic. So yeah, we did have, and we had a great cast, and we had a cast like all lined up. And I don't think we lost anybody. I don't think anybody dropped out.
No,
right?
We didn't.
Well, that's
over the course of 6 months, we retained every single cast member that we had cast 6 months prior. I don't know how. Like, I just consider ourselves incredibly lucky that we were able to keep everybody for when we were able to shoot 6 months later. Because I mean, a plethora of things could have happened that could have interrupted the process. But fortunately, even when we picked filming back up 6 months later, everybody was, you know, ready to come back at it. And some folks, I mean, they were so passionate about this project that they would even come on days where they weren't filming just to help out around set. And it was, I'm telling you, like the cast and crew that we had, they were the reason that this show happened. Like the passion that they had and the work they were willing to put in. I mean, we could not express enough thanks for the work they put into this.
I love that. I love that. And as you mentioned, talking about over 6 months, nothing really going wrong. There with the pandemic, there's so many things that could have went wrong. You know, I know you guys had a lot of procedures and protocols in place to minimize and be proactive in preventing. But as we all know from what we've been seeing around the world, still to this day, unfortunately, COVID is still a factor. So, you know, hats off to you guys for not only filming in the midst of the pandemic, but safely filming in the midst of the pandemic without having a breakout or any major issues that forced you to have to like pivot and shut down. So I know you did touch on earlier, you were getting into, Andrew, specifically around like what this project really means to you guys. And I'm curious, you know, each of you, I'm sure, have your own reason as to how this project has allowed you to tell a bit of your story. Of course, you're a part of it, but what was really the inspiration behind this series, and what does it mean to each of you? And I'll start off with you, Lauryn.
Yeah, you know, I think it means, I know what it means to, I guess I know what it means to all three of us, but we grew up in a relatively small suburban town, and there weren't a lot of people of color. There weren't a lot of people from the LGBTQ community. And so I think as we got older and we were able to access those worlds a little bit more as we kind of broke out of the suburban life, I think we realized like what we had missed out on. And I know for a fact, we realized some of the things that happened during our childhood that weren't good and were damaging in some way that we never really were able to address. And so a lot of the show is about what it's like to kind of border these two worlds, right? Of, you know, when we grew up, we were like, you're not quite Hispanic enough for, you know, your Hispanic cousins, and you're not quite white enough for your friends at school. And it's like, well, what am I? Am I too little of that, but too much of this, or vice versa? And we realized too, that a lot of people face that in different cultures. And it's like, who am I today? Yeah. Right? Like, yeah. And so that was really important to us to kind of have that. And that's one of the big things that I always say about the show in general is dealing with family and dealing with grief within your family is such a experience, like a powerful experience that everybody goes through. Like it is the most relatable thing in the world. And so we wanted to bring something to the table that was relatable in that sense, but also very personal to us and our experiences growing up in Hispanic households. So definitely important to me to kind of get that across. Like there's no right way to be Hispanic. That's our big thing. There's no right way to be a person of color. And if somebody tells you that you're not Hispanic enough because you don't speak Spanish, then they don't know anything. Is basically what we were trying to get across.
Yeah. But just to add on to what Lauryn said, you know, for me, like the LGBTQ aspect was a very personal thing for me, because the character I play in the series, Raphael, the whole first season, he's closeted. He has a partner, has had a partner for 3 years, but his family doesn't know about it. He comes home and he has to put on this whole facade of being someone that he's not. And for me, that was a really personal aspect, because when we first started making the show, I myself was actually closeted. And going through the process of making the show and playing this character who was battling something inside themselves that was really personal to me actually aided greatly in my own coming out process. I think about a year later after we started making the show. So for me, it was really cathartic to play someone who was going through the struggle that I was going through in real life. Not only, these, cross-cultural identity problems, but also figuring out how is it, being someone in the LGBTQ community when you're also a racial minority and facing all these, masculinity complexes of what it means to be a man versus, being yourself and all of those things. So for me, the LGBTQ aspect was a very especially personal aspect for me while making this show.
Yeah. And I guess to piggyback on what these two have said, for me, doing this show has given me a greater appreciation for my culture, for my sense of identity, and also for all the sacrifices that my parents and their parents made coming here from Mexico. And I mean, fun fact, there was a period of time where I considered not even acting in the show. I was considering being just a behind the camera kind of guy. But it was actually Lauren who convinced myself to actually go in front of the camera because of how much I related so much to my character in the show, Gabrielle, who is someone who is kind of feels like his life has been put on pause. And I related to so much of that with my own experiences, having lived in suburbia. I mean, because of Lauren's persistence, I guess, in convincing me to do this, I said yes. And I'm all the more grateful to her for that because not only has his maybe a better storyteller, but also a better director. Because now having been in an actor's shoes doing this show, I feel like I've gained a lot more knowledge about how to direct actors better. On top of that, just having a better appreciation for my culture because of this. So, thank you so much, Lauren, for convincing me to say yes, because I'm all the more grateful for it.
Oh, I love that you guys keep hyping up Lauren. That's great. It's great that she was your coach and she's, still someone that you look up to in that sense. But I like what each of you have kind of touched on is the different aspects of culture and your experiences, from the Latinx community to LGBTQ community to just even being comfortable professionally, as you're sharing, Adrian, of being in front of the camera, now having that perspective. The key throughout everything that you each have shared is the perspective, the insight of knowing now what you didn't know then. It is remarkable to me as a woman of color now when I look back on my experiences as a Black girl, and I'm like, gosh, that was racist, or that was sexist, or that, and you don't realize it when you're in it, or that's a toxic environment. You don't really realize it because you kind of, take it as the norm. And I know we always talk a lot about gender and racial, but as you bring up, Andrew, even on the side of dealing as someone personally that has, dealt with that own struggle of, being a part of the LGBTQ community and trying to figure out what is masculinity look like? What does being a man look like? All these things that society always has us questioning. Like, am I Black enough? Am I Spanish enough? Am I manly enough? Like, we are always kind of torn. And it's ironic you say that, Lauren, because I'm like, oh my God, I think I've said those exact words. I was too Black to hang out with my white friends and too white to hang out with my Black friends. And I was just kind of somewhere in the middle trying to figure out, where do I fit in here? Yeah. So I like the fact that you guys have really been able to shine a light on these experiences that so many people can relate to and that have struggled with in their own way. So take us through. It's seven episodes from season 1 that you were able to create. I did take a look at it. It's very cool. It's very nice. You guys are phenomenal actors, by the way.
Thank you.
Share with those that are tuned in and listening, just kind of what they can expect. Of course, we don't want to spoil anything. We want them to watch themselves, but take us through the behind the scenes. I know we've touched on it a lot of what is Bordered, the plot of Bordered that they can expect when they watch themselves.
So Bordered is about 3 siblings who are kind of coming back together after a loss in the family. And they all have very, very, well, first of all, their relationships with each other are strained. And their relationships with their hometown, with their culture, they all have very, very different relationships with those things. So for instance, my character, Danny, is like, I'm not Hispanic. I want to be as far away from that as possible. I don't want people to think of me in a certain way because I'm a person of color, because I'm a female of color. So I'm just going to separate myself from it. I'm going to pretend like I don't speak Spanish. I'm just away from it. Andrew's character is a little bit more of I'll use it to my advantage, my culture. He's a businessman. So it's one of those things where it's oh, you're looking to fill a quota. You're trying to diversify, that's fine. I will be that person for you as long as it gets me the job. And Gabe, who's Adrian's character, is more in tune with the culture because he's still living at home, taking care of the parents. So he's just kind of never got separated from it to begin with. So all of their relationships with their culture and with each other is so different. So that's basically what the show is about, them coming home and having to face that grief for the loss and also kind of confront their secrets with each other and again with their hometown. So it's a drama, and I don't know if, in case you didn't pick up on that, a little bit of a drama.
Mhm.
There's some funny stuff in there, guys, right? But
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know. Yeah. I would definitely say it's more of like a dramedy, you know, because
I like that.
one of the things I really like about, and particularly how Lauren brought the unified voice of all the episodes together, because she had a hand in writing every one of the episodes, is that, especially with how we approach the humor, you know, we kind of have humor come in to make sense of the grief that we're going through, to make sense of some of the hard moments, because I know, especially in a lot of the hard times in my life, I've used humor to get through some of those harder moments and to try to make sense of what's happening in your life. And I think for all the more reason because of that, that's why we definitely have spots of humor in a lot of moments throughout the show. And so that's what I really like about the scripts that we've done.
And one more thing that I will tease is because our mom in the show, played by the incredible Michelle Jasso, she's also a really big character in the show as well. And kind of she deals with two things. One, kind of, you know, grieving the loss of her husband, and the second thing is dealing with a secret that I will not say what the secret is, but it is something that kind of threatens the bond of the family if it should surface. What the secret, we'll have to watch to find out. You'll have to tune in.
That's a good tease. That was a good
I
one.
like that. Such a filmmaker. Sounds like a little trailer. Watch episode 4 to find out more. So I like the line that I saw actually in the trailer leading up to the first episode of sometimes falling apart means learning to come together. And as you talk about the dynamics of these characters and how they each are dealing with their own individual struggles, but then their collective struggles as a community, as a family, where did that line come from? Like, where did this concept come from of being able to use, I'm going to take it a step further, being able to use your talents in filmmaking to be able to provide these stories that can shine a light on these different topics and be in a way motivational and inspiring and relatable and just something that people need to see, you know, other brown faces on screen playing these roles that they can relate to in one way or the other. So take us through this concept of sometimes falling apart means learning to come together and its influence on the show.
Yeah,
that's a very good question.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, I mean, just going through the lowest points in your life, you know, when you can't go any lower, you know, that's really when you start to make sense of so much. And when you feel like you finally get some clarity in what you have to do to get back on track. And for me, it's meant, you know, writing down a lot of my journal about, you know, what's going on. It's meant reaching out to people in my life that have helped me pick myself back up off the ground. And so, especially when we came up with this tagline of sometimes falling apart means learning to come together. I mean, I, for one, couldn't relate to that more because of some of the experience I've had in my life, coming from suburbia to even moving to Chicago, where the population here is much more than the town that I grew up in. So that's what I take from it.
Wow, you didn't seem stumped by that answer at all. That was that was like I'm like that was really good.
Well,
you nailed it. Okay. What about you guys, Adrian and Lauren? The pressure's on. Adrian just like knocked out.
Yeah, nailed that one. Nailed that one. Yeah, I think again, the point of it was like, especially as it relates to family, is like there's so much that can happen in a family to kind of tear you apart. And sometimes it does take something terrible happening to bring you all together. And yeah, I think that was, again, the big theme of the show is grief. I think probably more than anything, like grief and sadness are probably the most relatable things. And as hard as that is, and as difficult as that is, loss and grief, like people feel that. People feel that on a whole other level. And especially after the year and a half that we've had, more than a year and a half that we've had, there's been so much loss. And a lot of it's very personal loss. It's not even necessarily losing somebody physically, but people have experienced so much loss And like you said earlier, people are doing great things out of that loss. It's like, I lost my job, but I started this podcast, or I started this play, or I started this screenplay, whatever. And so I think, again, that's kind of the theme of it too, is like, yeah, things are falling apart, but like, look at us, like we're face to face again, and we're doing this again, and families coming together again. I think that's what the tagline is supposed to represent, is sometimes things are crappy, but sometimes they have to be in order for you to see what you have. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. 2 for 2.
Okay, I'm up.
No
I
pressure.
mean, honestly, like for me at least, I think that this really refers to the creative process of making this, especially with this having been, at least for me, the most personal story I've ever told. There were a lot of times where I could just feel myself like disassembling as I was putting this stuff together. Because Lauren and I, we co-wrote the 3rd episode of the show together. And there's a scene in the 3rd episode where my character kind of posthumously comes out to his dad as he's lying dead in the coffin. And for me, I remember telling Lauren and Adrian this. I was like, I was crying writing this monologue. Like I was literally like breaking down, like writing this monologue, because it was just, it felt so raw and real. And my dad's alive, like he's good and well. But like, I was just breaking down, thinking like, oh my God, like what if I had waited until my dad died to finally tell him these things about myself? And so for me, you know, even though I felt myself kind of disassembling as I was being raw and vulnerable, telling this story, you know, it was through that we were able to then come together, make this, you know, episode and all these episodes that came as a result of that. And so I think for the artistic process, you know, you are kind of disassembling yourself, because you always carry a piece of yourself into every project that you do. But it's through that creative process where you fall apart a little bit that you help others come together to make art.
Okay. Wow. 3 for, you know what I love about each of your answers throughout this entire conversation is the authenticity. You know, this is real. This is not you guys just coming up with a plot because it's trending right now of like, hey, let's talk about diversity, because a lot of people right now are just doing that. No, it's real. This is what you've lived. This is what you know, your own struggles. It's personal. It's therapeutic, even as you're sharing, of being able to write some of these same raw emotions that have you even thinking differently. What if I had waited? What if I didn't have these face-to-face conversations with my dad or my family? So I just love the true rawness and vulnerability that you are each bringing through your roles, through the web, you know, through the series, and through this conversation as well. So is there a season 2?
We would like there to be a season 2.
Okay. I love it.
I would love to do it.
So what's next then? Of like timeline, or are we just kind of still riding out season 1 and gonna wait, or are we already in the plans for season 2?
Yeah, we've had some initial discussions about where we could see each character kind of going as far as a season 2 goes. I think right now, you know, we're just kind of like basking in like, you know, satisfaction. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is out, it's out into the world, you know, and then I think come January of next year, then we're going to kind of have those conversations of, okay, you know, what would a season 2 look like? What interest is there for a season 2?
Yeah.
What would a possible fundraising process for that look like? But I think for right now, especially with it being the holidays, we're just like, okay, it's out. It's 3 years of our lives.
Yes.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I will say I was screenshotting once the season dropped. I was screenshotting every person that either sent me a message on Snapchat or text or Instagram saying, I'm watching this episode and I can't believe this is happening. And we do leave on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So everybody was like, what's going on? When's season 2 coming out? So I messaged the boys and I was like, man, it's looking like people want a season 2. So hopefully if we can get some more interest, a season 2 would definitely be what we would want to do for sure.
Yeah. It sounds like a season 2 is in the works and going to happen. Again, I agree. It's the holidays. You had a successful season 1. Enjoy it, celebrate it, and then now you can come back a little bit more refreshed and ready to tackle season 2. So where can those that are tuned in? I know you guys have season 1 is out on Open TV, the 7 episodes that people can watch. Share more information, promo it, of where people can follow and what they can look forward to, and anything else you want to plug or promote.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you want to follow the series on Instagram, the tagline's right there. So Bordered Web Series is where you can follow the show for more updates as we release, more clips from the show, little fun like online extras of the show, news and a possible season 2. That Instagram account is the best way to follow us. If you want to follow me personally, at Andrew the Nuno Twin is also a good way to stay up to date with anything Bordered. Those are my plugs. Anything you?
The only other one I have to add to that is you can follow me at Adrian the Nuno Twin. Got to keep that branding. For my own personal Instagram, if you want to catch up with what's going on in my life, How about you, Lauren?
Well, I don't have any twins to add to my Instagram handle, so it's just at Lauryn Lugo, and it's Lauren with a Y. So that's all I have. I don't have the fun twin thing. Oh, I need a fun twin thing.
Right? Yeah, like okay. Yeah. Again. Lauren and I don't have twins like you guys, so we're not as cool, I guess. But it really has been a pleasure just taking time to connect with the three of you and hear all the incredible work that's gone into your season 1, as well as just all the passion that's gone into this too, and making this something that is so connected to who each of you are at your core. So I really do appreciate you for taking time, joining me to talk about the show, and I'm excited for season 2.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Yeah, thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah,
thank you so much. This is great.
Of course. And everybody that is tuned in, of course, be sure to follow. You've got their individual handles. You can also follow the Bordered Web Series handle on Instagram. Check out the show for season 1 so that you can be prepared for when season 2 does drop. And again, for Lauren, Adrian, and Andrew, thank you guys so much for joining me. Happy holidays to you. Enjoy this downtime. It sounds like it's well-deserved, well-needed. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for the Bordered Web Series.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Renee.
Of course. All right, everybody, be sure to give them a follow so you can check out all the great work they're doing and connect with them and give them some support. And also be sure to follow the show at Beyond the Headlines across all social media platforms. Super easy to find. Wherever you get your podcast, you can check us out as we're bringing you new episodes each and every week. We've got more coming your way soon, so don't go anywhere too fast, as we'll be back soon with more on Beyond the Headlines. Talk to you guys soon.
Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.